Hello everyone, my name is Shibob. The first topic we'll be discussing under this government will be the meaning and the inception of government. So when you are being asked in your exam, Waec, Neco, Jamb, as the case may be, what is government all about? Government have about three different parts. We have government as the institution of a state. We have government as academic field of study. We have government as act or process of governing. So, but for now, for your exam, you basically see a lot of questions from government as the institution of a state. Now, if you are to define government as the institution of a state, you need to understand the meaning of the word institution. Institution is all about an entity, a body, an agency, or machinery. That is what institution is all about. So if its institution is all about that, it means when you talk about government as institution of a state, we are talking about government as a body of a state. So if they are to define it in your exam, you can say government as an institution of a state has to do with a body that carry out the functions of the affair of the state, or a body through which the will of the state is being attained. But essentially define it as an agency or machinery through which the will of the state is formulated, expressed, and attained. So on nutshell, government as institution of a state has to do with a body that carry out functions in the state. It could be lawmaking, implementation of laws, or interpretation of laws. The other part of government is government as act or process of governing. These have to do with the activities that involve making and enforcing the laws. So the methodology, the procedure that has to do with making, implementing laws in a country falls under government as process or art or governing. But the last part is the government as the academic field of study. The government as an academic field of study has to do with the courses that you will study in higher institution that will teach you government, or that will talk about government. So government as academic field of study has to do with studying things related to political institution and theories. So a perfect example of what you study that falls under government as academic field of study is something like political economy is under it, something like public administration, something like comparative polity, something like political theories, something like local government, and others. There are a lot of courses that you can study that can teach you what government is all about. So that is highly important. Even international relations, you see that in Jamb, also comes under government as academic field of study. With that, we'll now move on to the functions of government. What are the functions? We have plenty of functions. You know many functions, but the theory that we don't really have to forget as a student preparing for Waec, Neco, or Jamb, we don't need to forget that they make law, right? They implement law, they interpret law, they punish offenders. They have what we call prerogative of mercy. That one is carried out by the executive. Then beside that, they maintain laws and orders. They defend the country, protect life and property. We will have plenty of functions. So when you talk about functions of government, I'm a Waec student or Neco student, I will think about good things that can happen in a country. You understand? But beside that, it is also important to know the features of government. What are the things that is being encompassed, or what is government all about in detail? So in government, we'll talk about power is one of the features, the laws, the authority, the revenue, public support, and even lots more. So this falls under the features of government. But the truth is, why do you as a student need to watch this video? Why do you need it? You need to watch this video for your airs of your exam. And beside that, learning this government will teach you a lot of things about the country Nigeria. Will help you to also evaluate current events and then estimate future outcomes as well. It also aid you to develop abilities to solve problems in the society and make you to be a patriotic citizen and lots more. But beside that, the one main thing I want you to also know in this chapter 1 of government is state. So let's talk about state. A state is a centralized political organization. I can call it a group of people that are politically inclined. But if I'm going to write Jamb in 2026 or in any year, I have to know that when they ask me about state, the first thing I will focus on is to focus on the word called politica. Okay, so a political community, a political organization is a state. Okay, but beside that, I also need to focus on the word called sovereignty. Okay, now if they now ask me, a state is dash, and I see something, an option containing political, and I see an option containing sovereignty, please, for your Jamb's sake, you will always give preference to sovereignty. You know, because you cannot refer a country to be a state if the country is not sovereign. You understand? So sovereignty is the major element or feature or characteristics or attribute of a state. Are we together now? So please, basically, like I said, a state, you have to focus on the word called political. So when I ask you, political organization is a state, political community is a state, group of people living together in a particular jurisdiction, politically inclined, is a state as well. But when I ask me state is dash, I see an option containing political community, and I see an option containing sovereign jurisdiction. Please, as a Jamb student, focus on sovereign jurisdiction. Always focus on sovereignty. There are some couples of elements or features of a state. Number one feature is population. Number two feature is territory. And number three feature is government. And the last feature, basically, is sovereignty. Now let's talk about population. Population, we all know that they are the group of people living in an area. But how can you know the numbers of people living in an area? You do counting. The counting of this group of people living in an area is called the population census. Okay, but for Jamb's sake, Waec or Neco's sake, you might not likely say what is population. All right, so what you will likely say is, what year was the first population census in Nigeria? So for your exam's sake, the first population census that was conducted in Nigeria was in the year 1951/52. That was done by the colonial masters. So in the course of our section B part of government, I will talk about that. Okay, but beside that, the second census that was conducted in Nigeria was in 1962. And that 1962 census led to crisis. So we'll also talk about that in the long run. But beside that, we also need to know that we have other features of a state, like the government. But before the government, there's a particular statement I also want you to remember for Jamb sake. They will ask you, who said the population of a state must not be too big or too small? And the name of that person is called Aristotle. Aristotle is the great scholar we will talk about later, where he discussed the ideology known as the aristocracy. But that will be what we'll talk about in the long run in our discussion. The other element of a state is government. See, government can never be separated from the state. It's not possible for you to remove government from a state. If you dare remove government from a state, it's no longer a state anymore. It is called stateless society. Okay, and you know that from what we saying initially, that government makes law in the state. So if you remove government from the state, it means that state will not have laws. Okay, and when a state doesn't have laws, it means there will be chaos and disorder. And another statement we can use for chaos and disorder is called anarchy. So what will you see in your Jamb? Over time, Jamb have said this question where I'll be giving us a proof in the long run. They will ask you this way: the absence of government in a state leads to that. Your answer should be anarchy. It's simple as that. Anarchy means disorder or chaos. But beside that, they will ask you, a state without government is that. You can call it a state of anarchy. But don't forget, when there's anarchy, is as a result. Anarchy exists as a result that there is no laws. But another thing I want us to also understand about this state per se of anarchy is that the state of anarchy as an ideology is being believed by the anarchists